Fighting has resumed in Gaza after a week-long truce between Israel and Hamas expired. Israel says it has struck more than 200 targets inside the enclave overnight. Both sides have blamed each other for ending the ceasefire agreement. 178 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 600 others have been injured since fighting resumed. That's according to Gaza's health ministry. 100 hostages and 250 prisoners were released as part of the exchange that both sides negotiated on last week. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says America will continue to assist Israel with its war efforts.
It is important for us to be talking about, thinking about every aspect of this challenge, not only today, but also what happens the day after the conflict in Gaza is over. How are we thinking about what happens in Gaza itself? How's it governed? Where does the security come from? How do we begin to rebuild? And critically, how we get on a path to a just and lasting peace. And for us, of course, that has to result in a state for the Palestinians. So all of that's on the agenda in our conversations.
Stuart Ramsey begins our coverage from Israel's south.
For a week it's been quiet in Gaza. It was, in truth, a passing moment of peace. The streets filled with smoke and dust as bombs began to fall once again. People immediately rushed to search for loved ones and neighbours trapped in the rubble, desperately scrabbling by hand. Houses and apartment blocks smashed to pieces. This had gone on for weeks, but it's back with a vengeance. Sky News teams inside Gaza say the intensity of the attacks is as bad as it ever has been. For civilians caught up in this war, who started it again is probably of little consequence. They just want it all to stop. The bodies of the dead, shrouded in white, were laid together. Such a familiar, sad scene now. A woman, watched on by a little girl, gently stroked the body of a relative. We don't know who it is. In hospitals, staff struggle to deal with a new influx of injured from the bombardment. The medical centres of Gaza are already stretched to breaking point. Israel says Hamas is responsible for this, saying the group fired rockets, breaking the ceasefire.
We were prepared to see the continuation of the ceasefire. But not only did they not keep their commitments, and you can check this with your reporters on the ground, they opened fire. They started shooting rockets at 5:30 this morning into Israel. It's clear that Hamas violated the agreement. It's clear that Hamas started this round of fighting.
With negotiations over extending the ceasefire deadlocked, it was probably inevitable that hostilities would resume.
The Israeli Prime Minister has always said that whatever happens with the hostages, the war in Gaza would resume and would continue until Hamas is destroyed. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be more ceasefires to allow hostages out, but all the indicators are that this is going to be a grinding campaign and there is no end date set.
What happens to the hundreds of thousands in the south of Gaza is the greatest concern for the international community now. Already there is a mass exodus further south, these families leaving the city of Khan Yunis. Many on horses and carts or in cars packed full, carrying entire families and any possessions they can cram on board. Others move south on foot.
We're lost. We don't know where to go. We have no relatives in Rafah. We don't know anyone there. We have only our God.
The leaflet dropped by Israeli forces. A QR code links it to an interactive map dividing Gaza into block numbers. The IDF says the map will help residents evacuate. But thousands remain in the north. This school is full of people seeking shelter. It's in the Jabalia refugee camp, far from the relative safety of the south. A fire burns next to the building after an Israeli airstrike. As the fighting intensifies, they simply can't move.
Qatar has released a statement claiming to be committed to working on a sustained truce, but the continuous bombardment of Gaza complicates mediation efforts. Sky's Alastair Bunkle filed this update.
Qatar said that this morning, and I have to say it hasn't seemed to have had any effect on what the Israelis have been doing militarily-wise. It has been a pretty constant bombardment of Gaza from what we have seen and witnessed all day long. I mean, I can hear right now fighter jets back up in the sky. There's the constant sound of loud booms and thuds as the Israelis fire airstrikes and artillery strikes into Gaza, and then less frequent but still quite regular outcoming missiles coming from Gaza into Israel, which is a sign obviously from Hamas they are not defeated, which is why Israel is steely in its determination to continue this war and continue fighting until Hamas doesn't have that military capability. But of course the concern is that will come at a huge cost to civilian life and will just exacerbate further what is already a pretty critical humanitarian crisis in Gaza, regardless of the fact that there was this 7-day truce. So could there be another truce or maybe multiple truces in the coming days and weeks? I think it's entirely possible, but I think where we are tonight, it's not looking likely imminently.